After you've mastered EQ and compression on your vocals, the next step to a polished, clear, full-sounding vocal is through effects. So today I'm going to show you how to set up your reverb, delay, and other processors for getting your vocals as polished, full, and clear as they can. Because singers have a hard job, and you want to support them in every Sound Ninja way possible. Hey, if you're new here, my name's James and I help church sound techs save the day by making worship sound great. Go ahead and hit subscribe and ding the little bell to get notified every time I post a new video. Reverb is probably the first thing that you're going to reach for when you're trying to add some time and space to your vocals. It adds a feeling of spaciousness and sustain to your vocals, like you're in a bigger room than you're actually in. Now in live sound, we're already in a space, so why do you need to add artificial reverb when you have a natural room reverb from the speakers exciting the walls anyway? Added reverb can still help fill in the gaps and provide a space that's bigger than the actual space that you're in. If you're just getting started with reverb, the two main controls you need to master are the reverb time and the level of the reverb in relationship to the dry vocal, or the vocal that doesn't have any processing on it. The reverb time is how long it takes that reverb signal and the reflections coming out of the reverb to drop 60 decibels. So sometimes you'll see that labeled as RT60. In general, we want to match the length of the reverb to the tempo of the song. And the faster the tempo, the shorter time we have. So if you have a really upbeat worship song, those vocals are going to tend to like a little bit shorter reverb time. But if it's a slower song with more notes that are held out, a longer reverb time is going to help support the vocals that way. If you choose a reverb time that's too long, it can end up muddying things up. But a reverb time that's too short doesn't add in or fill in enough so that it makes it feel like it's in a smaller space rather than a bigger space. Here's a reverb that might be a little too long. Now let's make it way too long. Okay, maybe that's not terrible, but holy cow, that is long. Now let's take it down and make one that's probably too short for this song. Yeah, that's not quite enough to hold the sustain for these notes. On this faster song, this shorter reverb time still does sound kind of cool. You can also kick it up to really long and it feels good too. If you want a good starting place, it's hard to go wrong with 2 seconds, especially for the average tempo of the songs that we're singing at church. If you want to tailor the reverb to the song a little bit more closely, you can divide 240 by the tempo of the song, and that will give you the whole note, or 4 beats of that song for the reverb time. As an example, if your tempo is 80 beats per minute, you divide 240 by 80, and that gives you a reverb time of 3 seconds. If you want to try a half note instead of a whole note, divide that by 2, and then you've got 1.5 seconds. So you can see where my starting place of 2 seconds is actually pretty versatile. Narrowing down your options for the reverb time to 2 or 3 settings is a lot more helpful than just being able to pick somewhere between 900 milliseconds and 6 seconds. How are you going to decide that? When it comes to the level of your reverb return, you want to make it more conspicuous in its absence than in its presence. Basically, when it goes away, you notice it more than when it comes back in. All right, let's take a look at the vocal reverb. I've got it set up to about a whole note. I've got the same kind of reverb on the instruments and the drums. We can use this and our pre-delay to switch how the vocals feel and kind of push them back a little bit.
Let him down to the post he knew to be tied
That's about a 64th note.
They spit insult inside a deserving name. Then the whip falls down on his back. You come again with your 9 black straps. So whip fall down, you can have your.
Let's try it with way too much. So let's go to a 2 measure.
You can strike this man, you can make him bleed, but someday you'll answer on your knees.
And that adds a nice little spacious thing that, probably shouldn't work, but it does.
Wind those thorns and make your cursed crown, but you
Let's take off our pre-EQ to see what that's like.
have a good reason. There's a sacrifice on the table set, but Abe said was spared, and the Lord's he forgets. You can strike this man, you can make him bleed.
So when we add our pre-EQ, that lets us get away with reverbs that might be way longer than would normally be acceptable or sound good, but it helps carve out that space so that we can add that time dimension without getting things too muddy. And this keeps people from getting distracted by your reverb, because you don't want anybody to notice the reverb. You just want the reverb to feel natural, like it's supporting the vocals and it's part of the song. My starting place with a post-fader aux send is to set the reverb return at -12 dB. This assumes that the send level is at 0 and that it's post-fader, but this will get you in the ballpark pretty quickly without having to do a lot of thinking. And when you're thinking about something, you tend to use too much of it. Remember that when you're mixing for the room, there's already reverb from the room itself. But when you're mixing for a broadcast, you've got a singer that's about this far away from the vocal mic, and you've got a listener that might have their earbuds in. So you don't want it super, super dry for the broadcast. The reverb can help push it back in the mix just a little bit. So keep that in mind. The other thing you've got to remember when you're mixing for broadcast is that if you're monitoring in headphones lie to you. You can hear so much detail that you can't tell when something is drowning in reverb. So before you're rocking out in the headphones and thinking that the reverb feels good, make sure that you take them off and listen to a speaker as well, so somebody doesn't text you and think, "What on earth are you thinking with all the reverb on the vocals?" One thing that will set you apart as a mixer and help the band really like you is knowing when to ride up the reverb and delay, especially on parts with long notes or oohs and ahs that sustain a lot longer. I'm going to show you the difference on what you can get away with level on delay return when it's normally and when there's longer notes too. So take a listen.
In the garden he waits for the very moment he has made.
All right, that sounds weird, so let's bring it back.
Face before a fist, like the eyes before a kiss.
That's a little more subtle.
Beautiful language. And oh, the hour has come. The hour has come.
We'll get to more delay in just a second, but if you want to dive deeper into vocal reverb, I've got another tutorial for you up here. Now, when it comes to writing up delay on vocals, this makes you just feel like you're part of the band and you're actually making some musical contribution. And if you're a music nerd or want to be, it's really helpful to push up timed delays on a pentatonic scale because the notes harmonize with each other. I'm really not that smart. I got that from a comment. That type of delay is a musical delay or a tapped in delay. Basically, if you can tap your foot to the music and then tap your finger to the tempo of the music, then you can tap in delay to match the tempo of the song. It doesn't matter if you get it totally perfect as long as it's kinda close. So if you hit the tap tempo button and then you're watching it flash at you and then it's not flashing exactly when the beat is going, That's okay, you don't have to worry. As long as it's close, you're gonna be okay with the amount of feedback that we're gonna send. Every console's different on how they use a user assign button or have a specific button for tap tempo. But when you're looking at the delay unit, you'll see some different subdivisions or notes that you can choose for that delay. If you select a quarter note, it's assuming that what you tap is what you want the delay to be. If you select an eighth note, it'll cut that in half or have it be twice as fast as what you tap in. There's other fun ones that you can try, but I don't want to try to explain math and music at the same time. This is just kind of an overview. So you can have fun with those syncopated rhythms and dotted eighth note triplets and semiquaver, blah, blah, blah. All that's just weird. Let's just stick with eighths and quarters for right now.
I heard you ask what you already know. Where is he from and where will he go? It was he who said his kingdoms are not of here, and a throne I cannot see is a throne that I must fear.
If you don't do anything else with your delay other than tap in the tempo, please roll down the low pass filter. This will cut out the high frequencies that get distracting when you hear S's and T's repeating over and over again. Our brain and our hearing associates high frequencies with closeness. And with these effects, we're trying to simulate depth or something being tucked back or a little further away. So if you have a darker delay, it's going to give it a sense that it's further back in the mix, and you can push it up and use more of it before it becomes super noticeable.
Sibilance. 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 Sibilance.
I go over delays, delay times, and EQing them a whole lot more in this video up here if you want to check it out. Now, if you don't want to be tapping in the tempo of the song all the time, you can add a delay that's just there for adding spaciousness and depth, and it's not timed to the music. When we hear a sound in a space, we hear the direct sound first, or the sound that goes straight from the sound source right to our ears. Shortly after that, we hear the early reflections, or the bounces off the first few walls before it gets to our ears. So when we add a short delay of 25 milliseconds to 100 milliseconds, this simulates this same kind of reflection that we're hearing in a natural space. So when we add these in a live sound environment, we're letting the rest of the room take care of more of the reverberation, but we're adding some of these extra reflections to add some thickness to our vocals. Just like on our timed delays, we're going to want to roll down the top end and put the low pass filter down pretty low so that we don't get more of those S's and T's repeating and doubling.
So let's take a listen to this short delay. I've got 84 milliseconds and 36 milliseconds on the delay. They're panned hard left and right. Let's hear what it sounds like.
Led him down to the post he knew to be tied and bound, to be stripped and bruised with a scarlet robe wrapped around his frame. They spit insult inside a deserving name. Then the whip falls down on his back. You come again with your 9 black straps. So whip fall down, you can have your day. For these stripes will heal, all these stripes will save. You can strike this man, you can make him bleed, but someday you'll answer on your knees.
So I really like the way that that adds a little bit more depth. It's kind of, the delay is adding some more space to it. It's not just reverb tail, and it's not just really early reflections like you might find from the reverb unit itself, but we're adding another little layer and another little dimension to our vocals with this.
The trick with these is to keep them subtle. You don't want to be drawing attention to yourself with them. And if you push them up too much and it's a very short delay time, it can cause a sound that's like comb filtering, and you don't want to get into that. So again, keep it subtle and make it more conspicuous in its absence than in its presence. If you take these same delays and lengthen the delay time to 100 to 200 milliseconds, this can start to sound like tape delay or a slapback delay that was popular in the 1950s. Whether or not that works for your song, I don't know, but you can try it and let me know how it goes in the comments. Stylistically speaking, a lot of rock recordings don't have a whole lot of reverb. They've just got these short delays on the vocals in order to thicken it up a little bit. As far as the return level goes, -18 is a good starting place to keep these inconspicuous. All of these things are little tiny baby steps toward better vocal sounds, so each one of them isn't going to make a huge difference, but over time, and as you get them dialed in, they're going to just make things sound more natural. And that's what we want. We just want the singers to sound good. We're not trying to make ourselves the hero in this situation. Now, the next effect I'm going to tell you about can make your background vocals sound really big, or it can date you back into the 1980s, and it's called pitch shifting. These pitch shifters and doubling effects use a very short delay and a little bit of pitch shifting in either direction from the center of the pitch that came in. Well, I don't exactly know why it works, but it just sounds bigger, and bigger is better, and you've got to use it subtly. I mean, we're taking baby steps here, okay? Baby steps to the elevator, baby steps to big polished vocals. That's how we're going to get through this weekend without our therapist. But if this doesn't make sense because you're trying to get your vocals really in tune, but then you're trying to take them out of tune, why would that make it better? Well, let's imagine that you've got a choir full of people and they're all singing at the same time. They're all singing the same note. They might have timing that's just a little bit different, and this guy's vibrato might be different from this guy's vibrato. And you're just going to accept that that sounds good when you've got a big bunch of voices there. They're not perfectly in tune like robots.
All right, so now we're going to add in some pitch shifting. It sounds kind of weird by itself, but it adds a certain sort of depth to the character of the vocals. We're using the Sound Toys Little Micro Shift, but there's lots of other pitch shifters that work just as well. This is too much, of course. Let's solo it.
They spit insults inside a deserving name. Then the whip falls down on his back. You come again with your 9 black straps. So whip fall down, you can have your day. For these stripes will heal, all these stripes will
So it adds a certain thickness that's nice.
spend. You can make him bleed, but someday you'll answer.
I especially like it when the background vocals come in. It makes them sound more like more background vocals or thicker without being like, oh, they doubled all the vocals. It's just kind of a nice extra little thing you can add.
So that's what we're doing with pitch shifting. It can widen the stereo image and it can give you a little bit more fullness. Now again, don't push this up too far. I warned you, if you do it, you're going to get to Soundtech solo. And avoid the Soundtech solo at all costs. Now, another problem with using this at church is that it sounds good on background vocals, but it doesn't always sound so great on the lead vocal. So if you've got a singer that's singing background vocals on one song, but they're leading the next song, you don't want to leave that effect on their voice the whole time. And honestly, I'm a little too lazy to set up a scene or a snapshot to go from song to song where I'm taking the vocal out of one effect and putting it in an effect for another song. I just like to ride the faders and roll with it, so I'm not going to lean too heavily on this pitch shifting or chorus effect for those vocalists that are going to be singing lead sometimes and background vocals other times. So to review, we went over 4 types of effects that you can use to make your vocals sound bigger. We used reverb to add a little bit of artificial space or to make the notes sustain a little bit longer. We used a musical or tapped in delay to make repeats of the music, and that's especially helpful for songs with the melody in the pentatonic scale. We can also use shorter delay to thicken up our vocals and make it feel more like early reflections. And then finally, we can use pitch shifting to make our background vocals sound bigger and fuller. Hey, if you liked this video, go ahead and hit thumbs up. And if you want to see more stuff like this, hit subscribe and ding the little bell to get notified every time I post a new video. If you want to support this channel, you can find links to my merch store down in the description, and we'll see you back here next time on Attaway Audio.